Hello and welcome to the Safety Goals Podcast with Justin Torres and Charlie One, presented by Injure Free. This is episode 16 with our special guest, Carlos Quentin. And now Carlos Quentin may be a name you're familiar with from his days playing in the MLB, but now he works with another project that he's very much dedicated to called Before the Field. Before the Field is meant to get athletes ready and prepared for any and all activities that they'll have while playing sports, because sports can sometimes be stressful, and ultimately Carlos wants to reduce that. But first, we'll definitely get into all the stuff about Carlos's career, what he learned in the MLB, how he has broken and set records in the MLB which have yet to be broken, and also just how Before the Fields has progressed over the years since leaving the majors. So, I hope you guys are ready for everything that we have in this episode. It's gonna be a great one. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Okay, everyone. So we have Carlos Quentin with us, formerly of the MLB, but currently the CEO of Before the Field. Carlos, it is a pleasure to have you on. I've done a ton of research, as Charlie mentioned before we got on here, just about your career, but kind of your lifestyle, how you've gotten to the point where you're at now. And each of our listeners are going to be excited to want to hear about your MLB career, but I'm sure they're going to be extremely excited to hear about what you're doing with Before the Field. So Carlos, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Charlie, for having me. Excited. This may be my first podcast or first recorded podcast. I feel like I might have been on one before, but I'm sure all one or two people listen to it, so we're good.
Well, don't
we're
worry.
okay with rookies.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's the same thing that you're probably used to with post-game interviews. It's just a lot longer.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
But let's start out there. Could you just give our listeners, some background on who you are, where you grew up, and what truly made you fall in love with sports in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. So I was technically born in the LA/Orange County area. My parents, my father's Caucasian, my mother's Hispanic, Mexican. My father grew up in Compton. My mother grew up in Long Beach, and then I was born in a place called Bellflower, just adjacent to Long Beach. Anyways, till I was 2, I was in Los Alamitos. I only bring this up because it's relevant to probably the rest of the research you've done in my career. So coming from the LA area, 2 parents from the LA area, sports fans of the LA area, which is always interesting. Everyone assumes I grew up in San Diego. I basically did. So I got moved down here when I was a kid, probably 3 years old. Yeah, my parents wanted to just make sure I wasn't getting into trouble. So grew up in Chula Vista, played every sport possible so that latter objective from my parents was fulfilled, so I wouldn't have time to get into any trouble. I didn't think I was a trouble-laden kid, but maybe it was just because of sports. So, did everything from karate, soccer, baseball, basketball, flag football, volleyball. And I'm probably threw in some like roller hockey. I have no idea. All I can remember as a kid was my grandparents lived with us, and they would drive me to practice while my parents worked. And then I'd see my parents when they came home at 5 p.m., like most kids, right? Vacations were centered around going to tournaments. I grew fast as a kid. I was a big Mexican kid growing up. So I had size and I could run and was coordinated, and things on the field seemed pretty easy. It's where all my friends were too. So I really enjoyed sports growing up. I always talk about this as it relates to Before the Field of what, kind of the exact moments when I remember sports turning transactional. So, I'll keep that light here. We probably get into that later. But that was mostly as I got a little older and was starting to get identified as being able to be something on a field. And to be quite frank, closer to that 6-foot height range, that weight range, and that speed range, which are all physical attributes that you always hope parents take into account with their kids' development, that those are necessities to continue, right? So it's an important debate on whether that's awareness exists. Again, I don't want to go off on that tangent. So anyways, so yeah, I loved all the sports growing up, loved being on a field. The character that I pulled from that as a kid helped with a lot of discipline, work ethic, things that I recognize now that I'm out of sports, but while doing it as a young person, not really aware of what was shaping me, character wise, and those attributes going on to the future. So that was my early kind of like development. I think it's super important, kind of shaped my mindset now, even back then. That's how important sport is to to the world, to the development of people, development of young children, and into their adulthood. And that's a whole life, right? You keep going. You want me to go the whole path all the way through college? And yeah,
We'll touch on college in a moment, but I
that
think
good enough for the beginning?
that's good.
Okay. Good.
I think one thing that's very
First
interesting
act.
that you mentioned, is growing up in the Long Beach area. Currently, that's where I reside right now. I'm in Los Alamitos. So when you mentioned Bellflower, I knew exactly where you were talking about. So me being here in Long Beach, Charlie being in San Diego, you kind of got both of your homes are interviewing you right now.
Represented, yeah. And it's not even, it's just Los Alamitos is actually where I grew up, right next to the hospital, kitty corner to it, and a little duplex with like the majority of my full Hispanic family living on one corner. So yeah. Yeah.
Well,
if you're in Los Alamitos, you'll know exactly the spot, and probably the building took over that spot. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I think the correlations are very, very cool that they run there, but once it gets to baseball, that's where it stops. I played baseball when I was younger, but I never was able to get to the level where I knew I was going to be able to make something of it. I turned more to basketball. And I'm wondering for you, was there a certain, point where you realized, because to get to a point of playing college baseball, you have to choose baseball pretty much as the number one sport. So was there a point before getting to Stanford that you realized, okay, baseball's it, I'm giving it my all, I want to go to college for this, and that's what I want to keep doing?
Yeah, I mean, I can describe that moment pretty specifically. It really relates very much. Well, I guess it's a couple moments, but they happen like pretty close together in a realization as a young kid. So, right about the time I was in high school, I played on a travel team before that for about 3 or 4 years since I was 10. I was playing with 12-year-old kids because I was a big Mexican kid, right? So somehow I got recruited by this one person who I'll leave nameless because, I might disagree with some of their early tactics for baseball and youth. But anyways, I got recruited to this elite team in San Diego. There was only like 3 travel teams at the time. It was before the boom in competitive sports and how many programs exist now in every region. But I played on that team with older kids, didn't really recognize that I was younger, just trying to keep up. I got stuck in the outfield. I've been an outfielder since I was 10, which is interesting for any big leaguer. They're usually a shortstop first. Nope, I've been in the outfield because I got stuck there because I hadn't developed the 2 years in between a 10 and 12-year-old. Didn't develop the hands for an infielder, according to this gentleman. But anyways, played the outfield. When I got to high school, basically I started being identified in my age group, and I recognized that I was better than most kids my age. I made the varsity team. A varsity coach at my high school invited me to play in 2 winter ball games. He'd only had one other freshman make a varsity team. In those winter ball games, I hit a couple of homers, and he basically said he's our starting center fielder, and I hadn't entered high school yet, right? So that was interesting. I was like, okay, so I'm good enough to do this. Right around freshman year, I got invited to a showcase. There's so many now. This one's called Team One. It was still around then. I think it's still around now. It was a regional. My parents and my entire family kind of pulled some money together so that they can send me and pay for the administration fee or whatever, the entry fee. I went there, did 2 days I ran a 60. I hit 15 balls off in the batting cage. It was at A-State. I played in 2 games and got 4 at bats, and I did really well, and I threw from the outfield. And then right around that time, actually 3 months later, a publication named Baseball American. You might research this timing because I think it's the right timing. Maybe it was a year later. I'm not sure. But that publication came out, and it rated me like the best 15 or 14-year-old in the nation. And that's kind of the point when everything was changed, right? Like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And it was, I'm a kid. My parents don't have a sports background. My mom played for the Betty Boops in like a little softball rec league when she was a kid. My dad played JV basketball, and then, just kind of hung out with his friends. at Rancho Santa Fe, or at Santa Fe Springs High School over there in Orange County. So anyways, it was kind of a big shock to the entire family. Everyone was all super proud, but I was just like, I like to tell people the next day, basically the world changed. Coaches looked at me differently. My friends looked at me differently. I knew early on, and my parents, not in a negative way, like, they saw that I was pretty good in sports. So, one of my goals was to earn a college scholarship going into high school and just to anywhere. Like, I was just like, so my parents didn't have to pay for it. And now all of a sudden I'm ranked as this kid in a ranking system. I had no idea that they did. I'm just oblivious, man. Like, I was just rolling into this thing, and that happens. It's a kid's dream. I understand it. But unwrapping the psychology of just all of those things, there's just so many things I can kind of go back to that define me differently. I mean, you had a pure joy for love and sport, and then all of a sudden this happened, and not poor me, I'm really lucky, but things changed significantly, right? College was a real option. And I'll give you another story. Like, I think like a month or two later, some I don't even know, I kind of remember his name, but like a guy who was trying to be an agent somehow got my home number and called, and I picked up the phone, and there's no cell phones then, right? It's the Zach Morris phone. And he talked to me for like 3 hours about everything that I'm supposed to be. And I'm like, I didn't know how to hang up the phone with an adult because I'm like 15. I'm like, I don't want to be rude. And I told my mom about it. She called him back and just lit his ass up because she's like, what are you doing? And, obviously that guy sucked. But, that's like just an early story of like, imagine what happens now. So anyways, I don't want to say poor me at all, but I don't know. I like to be truthful about it. If I dressed it up a little bit, it'd be like, I got ranked in the system and it was awesome. I'm off and running, man. Like, yeah, I can go to college and now I can be pro. But imagine you're a 15-year-old kid and you're just like, oh, college is like going to happen. And now millions of dollars might be there. And it's like, wait a second. Like, the dream was always to play, for any kid. I want to play Major League Baseball. I want to be an NFL player. Be honest with you, I wanted to be an NBA player because I thought I was going to be 6'6" and be the first Hispanic, like, Michael Jordan.
Those are my dreams. Don't worry.
Right. I've seen your jump shot, and
it's legit.
You've never had a chance. Yeah, never had a chance.
And my point is this. The dream of being a Major League Baseball player for me back then was literally just playing. And I don't think, like, they made money. You didn't know how much money that they made. I don't think I knew how much money they made when I was 15 because I didn't have time to even care. I was just playing sports. And all of a sudden you wake up out of this kind of just childhood thing. And there you go. So it was a blessing. That's the honest feelings behind it. It made me feel important. It did. It gave me value to the society. Like, everyone thought I was cool. I mean, it was great, in that regard. But it's also like, you got to deal with like the expectation now of what you need to be as a kid. And you like, for me, I'm like, well, I got to be that like every single place I like on a field. I got to be the best player. And it's good and bad because I use that as for other sports to try to be the best in. And then baseball was, okay, well, it's an interesting sport. It's over time. You can't just be the best on the field every single day. It happens over time. So anyways, scouts, things like that, the base MLB stuff, all the stuff that just like you never think of in any dream kind of happens. Now you'd understand it's good because everyone's aware of it. Back then I was like, whoa, okay, there's that, there's that. Wait. And then, I'm sitting at football practice and my middle linebacker and good friend is like, hey man, like, I heard you're going to make like $2 million. And I'm like, maybe. I'm like, where'd you hear that from? He's like, I don't know. That's what they said. Like, can I have $20? Like, when you do that? And I'm like, yeah, sure, bro. Like, okay, let's go. We got to run this defense here. Like, we still got a full season, man. So anyways, I don't know. All that's just a rant and random. So
did you feel like, when that happened at 15 and you had that ranking, did you feel like because you still played other sports? I mean, football was a big sport for you in high school. I mean, that was one of your, I mean, maybe your better sport in some ways, but did you feel that because of that ranking then that your path was set and therefore you didn't have a choice in any other sport?
Yeah, 100%. I loved football because there was no ranking and it was like, I was always trying to prove myself. I think, everyone kind of can identify how best motivates them. the kind of back against the wall, write me off is always kind of like the best way for me. And then when you sit there and they're basically like, hey, you made it, like, and in this weird, like, kind of way, yeah, it's like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to try to shoot down any baseball fans, but like, for a kid playing football and doing basketball, baseball in general is a pretty drastic change of pace, man. You kind of, and
Yeah.
when you practice in high school, Charlie, you remember back then, I mean, it's like 10 swings, 20 fly balls,
Yeah.
you run the bases and then pack it up and go home because we don't have lights, and you play the games. So it's like, football, you're hitting people, basketball, you're moving. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm gonna be standing in the outfield a lot, maybe, and that's
Right.
great because I can fulfill, help my parents out with tuition to college, and then I guess now there's this pro environment that I have no clue about. But let's see what happens. But yeah, I mean, all blessings. I get to sit here and talk to you today because of it, and I have that perspective. But sometimes you just got to be honest with what was kind of happening with yourself.
Sports are in full swing 24/7, which means athletes are bound to get injured. Injure-Free is a software platform used by youth sport organizations and schools that was developed to help coaches, parents, and administrators communicate injuries that occur and ensure a safe return to play. These sports safety networks are essential for sports teams working to provide the safest possible environment for their families. For more information or to schedule a demo, please visit www.injurefree.com. That's www.injurefree.com.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, Carlos, I mean, one of the biggest things too is that for parents today, I mean, it's what you're describing in this world of, I don't know what's about to come. Even today, parents have this idea of where their kids are going to go or what they're going to do, and they don't know. Because they either haven't experienced it or they see and read about it. So they think they have this understanding, but really what you're describing here are the nuances, the transactional side of sports that do shape this process. And so I think it's great for you. I mean, when you reflect on this after your career and you look back, now you do know. Now you can talk about it in a way with education and clarity as to maybe why certain things happened, or perhaps even as you think about how your life could be different in what if I did stay with football versus baseball? What if I cut against that grain and said, listen, I may be the best ranked baseball player, blah, 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 but this is where my passion is. Would that have changed, what outcomes? But I mean, it's a good perspective to have. And I think it's, valid. I mean, you two-time All-Star, man. I mean, you've played the game for a long time. And so to be able to have that and share that with other people, I think is validating and helpful to hear in a lot of ways.
No, I appreciate it, Charlie. Yeah, man. I mean, like I lived a kid's dream. I just try to give some perspective on what that might be, depending on the person. And yeah, I think you hit it on the head with football. I love football. Like I loved it. It was pure joy. I liked baseball, and I was always first to tell people like what shaped me as a man and as a person. The things that I relied on that gave me an edge in baseball was all from football. Was all from the coaches. I had a tremendous coach in football. I had a great coach in baseball, but football is an interesting one for shaping people, and that's independent of all the things that come around it, all the physical stuff. I just got to speak honestly about that gave me an edge. It also created some injuries early on, but who knows?
Sure.
That's a full on. That's probably another episode based on the psychology and confidence building of athletes and what would you give up to get somewhere? What's that's really soft and objective together. So that's a whole nother debate. But yeah, man, that's the truth of it, 100%.
I always used to say the same thing. People would always ask me, what's your favorite, baseball or football? And I wasn't in your boat. I mean, I wasn't getting ranked, but I was definitely. I mean, I had full ride scholarships to play both sports, and I always said baseball was my passion. Football was other way around. Football was my passion. Baseball was my love, because of all the energy and all of the excitement that you get out of football. It's just a different environment, and baseball, you have to be dedicated to it. It's a long season, and there's so much repetition doing the exact same things, so you really have to enjoy it and love it. Otherwise forget it, right? I mean, you're just not going to develop.
Don't sell yourself short, Charlie, man. Like, I've seen your left-handed swing, and I can only imagine what you do on a baseball or on a football field. So we're in alignment 100%. We talked about this, offline, personally.
Yeah.
I think we've always kind of agreed on a lot of these things. It's always interesting though when you apply it to what's happened this day and age, and especially with injury free and what you guys are implementing and pioneering, right? So it's an interesting conversation. We both have young kids, right? And I know you have your daughters. I got my son, and I mean he's not afraid of contact. I just had flag football games yesterday, and I had to say, hey man, keep your head up. Don't just put it down and run at the guy.
Like, oh man, here we go. Yeah,
that's tackle. Get your head up and let's try not to get him to grab your flag, because you just ran right at him and he grabbed your flag. You got to make a cut. All right. And even in tackle, you at least got to get one cut in and then go, So but anyways, that's another story.
Well,
so.
It's good.
Carlos, I just got to say, well, look, after you went to Stanford, you got your college scholarship. So that part of the whole deal for you was done. The next step then came for, playing in the MLB. You were drafted in the first round, which is very impressive. And you got sent all the way to the Arizona Diamondbacks. So it wasn't so far from home, wasn't playing for the Padres just yet. But once you got drafted, you actually sat out with an injury for Tommy John as an outfielder, which is extremely rare right now in the MLB. The Yankees outfielder is actually going through the same issue and having his surgery. So I was wondering, in your career, you've had a lot of injuries pop up, but clearly you are not someone that is afraid of contact, much like your son, because you hold the record for being hit by pitch in multiple different seasons, in multiple different occasions. You have the hit by pitch record in the minor league for being hit 43 times. And that to me is already on its own a very ridiculous feat to think, because I'm thinking these guys are throwing 80 to 100 mile per hour fastballs at me. I sure as hell am not stepping in the batter's box, but you want to, take on that charge. You say, I want to get on base. So for you, how much was the idea of playing your sport while not being injured on your mind until you then had those injuries to deal with?
There's a lot there, right? I developed, maybe to a detriment later on in my career, but it's just age, and it's better that I had this mentality. Injuries like happened, and I just was like, I recovered, right? So I get hurt, I recover fast, and I get back on the field, and I'll play with some discomfort and some pain, and that's not a problem. And we're playing baseball here, guys. Like this is not football, not basketball. We're playing baseball here. Like, opportunities for injuries is that I decide to I don't get a ball hit to me in the outfield for 7 innings and I sprint and I strain a hamstring. Like, that's self-inflicted and just circumstances of the game. Maybe I didn't stretch, right? Or you have 90 some mile an hour fastball coming at you. You got a helmet on for the most part, right? And you got a chance to move if you see enough. Charlie knows this. You see enough pitches, right? Like, you can move. It just depends on where you're going to move. So I guess what I would say with all that is that one, if you ask me about hit by pitches specifically, it's really tied into like a philosophy in hitting that's not really technical in any regard. It's more psychological. Injuries happening in college, things followed me around. You have some. I found out from after being done and getting older that I had some things going on health wise that made me susceptible to injuries. So it's good that I didn't know that, because it might have been not an excuse, but it might have just been something psychologically that would have been difficult to overcome. So it's better that it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you're injury prone. Well, because of this thing, because it's something related to your genetics. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to know that, because I still got a job to do. That makes sense. I still got to go out and play, and I still got to perform. I still have opportunity. So what's that going to help me? That wasn't going to change any of my story. You know what I'm saying? I was going to get hurt, and I was going to get back on the field as fast as I could, because I wanted to be on the field. I wanted to play. And that's the only way you get to succeed. That's the truth, is to step in and take on the risk. Right. Yeah. Trying to pull that more apart. The injuries, I could tell you about that Tommy John injury a little bit, right? Like, It's related to a mentality that, in my freshman year at Stanford, I was freshman, Pac-10 freshman of the year. Made
Dating yourself now.
Yeah, I know, right? We're at the Pac-2 right now, so
Yeah.
gone through some transitions. But I didn't play my first college baseball game. We lost. Someone got sick. And then my first college at bat, I hit a homer and drove in 4 runs, and I didn't come out of the lineup, right? And I hit 4 hole as a freshman the entire year. Our team was supposed to suck, and we lost our first game and fell out of complete rankings. And then we didn't lose a game for 2 months, and we were number 1 in the nation the entire year as freshmen,
Wow.
right? And it was interesting. They're in the same place right now as Stanford is. It's similar. There's a lot of opportunity for young kids, but luckily we seized it. We didn't know any better. But my point is, that year I got to the collegiate national team, came back with a lot of expectation as a sophomore, experienced like difficulty on the field. I did okay, but not up to par. It happens. You see it in college all the time. I guess sophomore slumpish, whatever. A lot of expectation, a lot of pressure. I made the collegiate team again, went out and actually had a great summer, somehow cleared my head, and the change happened. Sometimes you just need that change. Came back, was set to go. A lot of expectation, a lot of, started off pretty well. And I remember, you're a junior in college and scouts are watching every single game, right? And how I blew out my arm was doing infield and outfield. And I got a weird hop when I was throwing to third base. It kind of shot up on me. I kind of caught it. And I went to throw, I was throwing every ball, just letting it go. When I got my arm back, I didn't get it far enough back, and mechanically I threw one and I kind of spiked it. And because of the whip on my arm, I had a pretty good arm as a kid. My arm slammed against my body, and literally the torque on my forearm and my bicep, whatever muscle, whatever the heck, I don't get the end. You got it. You guys fix that, right? Whatever bone is in your
ulna, the radius. Yeah.
Ulna. Yeah. Basically the torque went like that and jerked and tore my ligament, my ulnar collateral lateral, whatever it is, ligament. And I felt the burning right away. And, let me flip this on its head really quick. If that didn't happen, it's great not to have Tommy John when you're like, what was I, 19, not good for your draft status. Not great because right now I'm still like got edema in my elbow and it still hurts. Mm-hmm. And I sure as hell love to have that arm when I was, towards the end of my career. But when you take a kid who wants to do well, who has a ton of expectations, and you force him to stay within himself because he can't overswing. If I didn't have Tommy John, I don't know if I would have hit 400 that year and been a Golden Spikes finalist. I swear, I shit you not. It's kind of like a weird blessing, and I'm pretty realistic about it, where I'm like, if I couldn't swing and I had to make myself as efficient as possible that year, I'm not trying to, I just know like that I got compact and I could have that in my toolbox. I learned as a hitter. I had a 30-game hitting streak. I went off, right? Got myself in the first round, potentially could have been in the top 10. And then I just told everyone before that I needed Tommy John. I still got drafted in the first round. So It's just kind of one of those weird things when you look at it, like things happen strangely, how your psychology takes things in, a few things on that, right? If I wasn't willing, my agent at the time, my advisor was telling me to get surgery and come back for my senior year. He flew out specifically for that. And in my head, there was no, I couldn't fathom not being on the field. I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I can still swing. And they're like, no, but this is I'm like, yeah, but if I come back, it's the same thing. I'd rather play. And I think I was oblivious. They were giving me good advice and they were just like, okay, do what he wants to do. And then I went and did that. And I was basically, because I didn't believe I would ever come off the field. It didn't make sense to me. That makes sense, right? So I didn't have any chance to go do that, and that happened, and it worked out. I'm not going to tell anyone else to do that, but you look back and you pull it apart. That's interesting. You go back to the hit by pitches. if you break down what a really a bat is between just in any at any level, in your little league, it's even more important. You show up to the plate and you look like you're scared you're not going to hit the ball. You're not going to hit the ball. That's one. But two, the pitcher's not going to let you hit the ball because they feel like they're in control. So the question is, how do you make someone feel uncomfortable when you're going one-on-one? Because baseball is just one-on-one over and over. And someone's waiting in a line. There's one guy throwing the ball, and it's just two people competing with a ball. That's really it. And that's hitting. And if you look at that, like you can go through mechanics, and this is a tough thing when you try to get to young kids because everyone's looking for mechanics. Sorry, I'm going on tangents. But it's like, what is your confidence level? What do you believe walking up to the plate? Because what you believe is going to be 90% more effective and influential over what's going to happen. You can do everything wrong, but believe 90% deep down your soul that you're going to dominate and hit the ball, hit a homer off this person, or just crush the ball. I don't care if it's Justin Verlander or God knows whoever's throwing 106. Well, if you believe it, that person can feel it. And that's the way that baseball really is, if you really look at it. If you're going to look at all the analytics, that misses it, right? It's who walks up and is willing to be like, fuck it, let's go. Like, it's a fight. So at the end of the day, getting hit by pitches was me standing on the plate saying, all right, I know I'm making you uncomfortable, but I'm not going to flinch. And if you hit me, I go to first base. So what? Somehow I get a benefit in this game for not moving. Right. And I'm like, all right, that's an advantage. I can deal with pain. The only thing keeping me from doing that is, one, if I can turn the right way and get hit the right way, which I was taught as a young kid to do. You turn your back to the ball and you duck your head, and that's it. And then you deal with the pain and the bruises. Well, that's easy because, I don't know, I was wired that way. But ultimately, if pitching is about hitting your spots and hitting is about hitting mistakes, if I make the pitcher uncomfortable just a tick and he misses a spot, then guess what? I just turned it in my advantage because hitters were all, the game's not created for us to be the most successful. It's created for pitchers, right? I mean, we only get, if we hit three out of 10, we're gods, they give up like,
and
they get, yeah.
Well,
So
I'm just gonna say that realistically, being hit by those pitches and suffering, the Tommy John injury ahead of actually playing in the MLB, does that have any effect on your mindset for how to keep your body right during the season and actually to train and prepare ahead of time and prevent the likelihood that these injuries occur? Because clearly, if you're going to go and get hit by 43 pitches, you got to have some strong back muscles. You got to be putting in time to make sure that your body can take those hits first off.
I think I get what you're saying. What I would say is I'd reshape it a little bit where getting hit by a pitch never concerned me. And I never trained to take a pitch in the back or whatever. I just was luckily as a kid got taught how to take a pitch and be okay. Where I didn't like turn or put my hands out or do this or have my hands exposed. So I was able to prevent some injuries because I was taught early how to take a pitch, hit by pitch. My concern in training was, even in minor leagues and in college now, right, with the amount of games you play, about 100 and some games if you're doing fall ball or whatever. Now they're playing more. It was the wear and tear of a very violent swing, right? From one side of trying to be able to protect joints, understanding my body and learning that I have pretty hypermobile joints with a really quick twitch engine, which means if I'm out of whack, things break. And you can see in my career over time, baseball's, the body type for a baseball player, it's not a football player body because that probably can get through 100 games, but you got to try to get through 160 to be on the field. Baseball rewards longevity. If you show up for 160 games, you're going to get 30 and 100. You will, if you have some ability there. And you just got to wait it out. I mean, look at Juan Soto here, right? He hit his marks probably in the last week of the year, and then baseball analysis, people who follow baseball think he's a god because they don't understand, hey, and it's just great. That's a great season. But my point is, a lot of my focus on my health and my body were meant towards trying to limit it, the wear and tear on knees, on shoulders. In the outfield, I wasn't afraid to dive or run into a wall. Those things are just part of it. But it's the wear and tear of the everyday game of baseball is the main one, and ultimately ended my career with, knees and cartilage damage. And that was geared towards most of the training, but that's what I would say. The hit by pitches stuff was just, I don't know. I think that was just more a hitting style, to be honest.
Not many youth sports administrators began their careers with the dream of negotiating insurance rates. Most have the love and passion for the game and saw it as a way to inspire the next generation of youth athletes. However, nowadays insurance can be the single greatest cost for a youth sports organization. At American Sports Insurance Services, we've done the work for you and created the single most comprehensive youth sports insurance program on the market. We did it by aggregating the largest youth sports injury database in the world. Let us do the heavy lifting and represent you for all your risk management needs. For more information or to get a quote, visit www.getamsis.com. That's www.getamsis.com.
I like that approach, that what you described there, as far as if you think you're going to be successful, or putting yourself in a framework that says, I'm going to make the other person uncomfortable, or, this is my purposeful intent towards success. I think that also bridges a gap. And that's now you're talking, you go way back to what you were saying before about how sports influences a mentality in athletes, and then ultimately later in life, really reflects on, I think, a general approach towards not being afraid to take these types of risks, to go out on limbs, to try to change systems and places as an adult that you saw as a child are you recognize now as being either broken or not necessarily the optimum pathway for kids to enjoy at all levels.
Yeah.
And really ultimately producing higher quality individuals through that process, getting them into hey, yeah, I can create a soccer player. I can get them to specialize at the age of 10, and I can run them into the ground. And then at 18, they're describing the type of long-term overuse injuries that you're describing. Whereas, extending that career, but then also mentally as just being a good quality person, but during the game and beyond the game. And then what is that impact and influence? But that mentality starts with, how do you step into the box? And I love that approach. I mean, I think that's, that's unique. Not unique, but not taught enough. Let's put it that way.
No, I mean, you touched on a lot of great stuff there, Charlie. I mean, I attribute a lot of some of the success I've had, and that belief system. One, you have character attributes that involve work ethic, right? Like, as soon as you feel like you've made it, you got to work harder. That's just bottom line. Like, the elite of the elite end up having to, things change. It turns into completely character driven, because all of our talent levels are very similar, right? At the highest levels, something else separates it, and it's usually mental. But you look at like the multi-sport, right, where you said, versus specialization for young kids. And one of the psychological benefits that stayed with me and still with me, strangely enough, right? Like, I still believe I can go and train for a month and go slam dunk a basketball. And I'm going to go, hopefully I'll test that theory out here soon. But my point is, playing so many sports as a kid, I started just believing that I could go on any field and do anything. And I'm like, okay, it's just a function of me getting a couple practices on. And then it's just me deciding I'm going to go do that and be better. And maybe I was wired there and I had some physical abilities, but the psychological confidence that I gained from when I was a kid of being able to do that just stayed with me the entire time. Even when you faced competition that was extremely was very good. And it was kind of like, okay, that guy's just as good as me, but I just need to train more and I'll be better. That's it. And that was really as simple as it gets. But it was like, did I believe that? And I sure as hell did. You can say it, not believe it, but how do you hone that belief? It's interesting. I don't know how you did. I could just tell you how to describe it, how it happened for me. And it was a lot really related to that. And the ongoing debate between, specialization and multi-sport athletes, specialized versus multi-sport athletes. What you said from an injury standpoint is 100% valid. If I would have just played baseball, I would have just probably broken in two, probably in high school, who knows? But the psychological confidence that comes, that's the interesting side of a young athlete, of how you hone that or put them on the right path to where they believe that they're in control. We're not, it's just as human beings, we're not in control of a lot of things, man. It's it's scary when you go down that rabbit hole, but it doesn't serve a purpose when you're trying to accomplish something. You got to believe that you're in control of something. And for the most part, that belief that you control something involves accountability and then highly ties back to like work ethic, right? You shape this person. I might have just been blessed to have some physical tools and then this kind of mentality shape. And that might have just been the right combination to keep pushing me further, and just put in a little bit of luck, because you sure as hell need some of that as you keep going through it, some timing. I mean, all that matters. And then you look back as a kid and you don't recognize, like, you kind of were told like, oh, it's rare. And then as an adult, you look back when you're a kid and you're just like, oh crap, like I was that lucky in that percentage and those numbers to actually get there. It sure as hell didn't feel like it. It just felt like it was linear, right? But then would it have been good to be self-aware of it? Probably not for me. Probably not. It would have been bad. It would be self, you almost had to be a little oblivious.
Freak a lot of kids out. Yeah, you gotta freak out.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think that you're describing that mental game too. I mean, and how that approach. I mean, so that shift gears a bit here and talk a bit more about how you came from your personal experiences and your pattern in life, then, to really what drove you to developing and founding Before the Field.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. It really involves that kind of that transactional, that high level transactional nature of Major League Baseball. What's behind the curtain from fans. Some fans who already know it because they played in college and understand where that leads. Charlie, you already knew where that was going, right? That things just make sense where it happens. But it provides entertainment for a lot of people, and sports is one of the most deeply loved things and authentic things left in this world for a lot of people. But so the back end of it and understanding, going through it, stuff at that high level, understanding how you are valued you're valued as what that line is you produce at the, on your baseball card. That's really the truth of it. There's a lot of good people there, but it's a $1 trillion industry, man. I know it's billion. I'd say it's trillion because it influences so much, right, that we can't quantify. So anyways, leaving that game, leaving something you've done for so many years, experiencing, I just kind of say it now, I probably was in poor mental health leaving, right? I think any transition that's that big, when you had something in your life that long, leads to something there. And that's not saying that like there's varying degrees of that, right? Like where you're not in a great place, right? And ultimately,
what does that mean for you? I mean, real quick, Carlos, I mean, I think that's important. I mean, we mental health is such an important thing. You hear about it post-pandemic, and that was almost like this lens that got opened up that we've got a mental health problem across the board. But really, when you look at the microcosm in sports, I mean, mental health is an issue, and we use that term so generally now that it's almost like, oh, it's a mental health thing.
Yeah.
But for you, when you talk about that issue, and I mean, you can use your own context, but when you talk about specifically, what does that mean? Yeah. When you talk about being in a poor state of mental health for you, like I said, 2-time All-Star. I mean, you had a professional baseball. So what did that mean for you to be in a poor state of mental health?
So, I'm going to answer this question. I don't want to go too long because I just want to give a direct answer, but I'm probably not going to, unfortunately. As I dissect it, because it's a super personal question, man. Like I get like tingles and like emotional reactions just talking about it. That's just the truth of it, because then I can't control those things, how deeply ingrained it is to me psychologically and emotionally. I look at how the first thing, mental health can be good and bad. I think right now, when you say mental health, there's a kind of a negative stigma to it, and it's necessary because I think it's athletes trying to describe how they're feeling. And it's not necessarily great, right? But understanding that it's a spectrum, that you can pull it apart and be very granular, right? And I say that in a sense that having poor mental health over time puts potential people at risk. It's a timing thing. It's consistent. It's how stress exists for every person, right? Chronic or acute. And I would say that it's a combination of both, but chronic over time leads to habits and stress management and behavior. So, I only bring that up to define how I was experiencing, the transition, right? Loss of value of who I was. One day you don't have value in this thing yet you were valuable, right? And that the world valued, and you kind of disappear. Purpose, waking up and training and working out to an objective and goal gone, a sense of ego that still remains, that, hey, I'm important. Why isn't like, and acting like you're feeling like you're important. One, even if I didn't consider myself ego driven, but it's there for every person. Sometimes ego is great and you need it. It's part of confidence to some point, right? It's this weird balance. So, loss of value, a reflection of that loss of value and emotional states changing, some depression kind of symptoms. I don't know. And to round this all up, how you experience, you don't have a benchmark for it really, like it's just, it's your own mind's eye of how you're feeling in the world. So I don't know, I part of me, when I describe it, it's like, I don't know. I just try to, like, before I wouldn't mention it in this capacity, just be like, hey, emotional volatility, loss of value, all these things. Well, I'm like, let me just sum it up, guys. Like, I don't think I was in a good place mentally. I had poor mental health. That's the truth of it. How long did it last? A few months. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I was experiencing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
in my head, like, you don't want to remember things that are traumatic, right? That's our natural instinct to move on. So I do remember making the decision to go to business school. And I knew that was a major decision in my life. And I always point back to what brought me out of it. And, so when I can go into that in a second, but, when I say, like, pulling that apart, those things were, very much present for me that I was experiencing. At what level, I don't believe I was at risk, right? But I don't believe I was at risk yet, because that's a function of time and experience and behavioral changes that happen and stress. So, I always default to medium, to describe it. But like I said, how do you describe it, man? It's such a, it needs to be talked about in some capacity to make people aware. So mental health is a term, I think, is a reaction from people experiencing it to describe something that's significant to them, that's hard to describe for them personally. And we're doing our best to understand it as people communicating and helping people. So sorry for that long answer. Those are the descriptions of it. I don't believe I was at risk. I needed to change, and I needed it to end, because if I would have continued it, it would have been, I don't think it would have been good, because we're all people and we're just a function of what's stressing us and causing reactions from us. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, Carlos, you spoke on how you viewed it as you lost your value. I think it sometimes can be hard, especially for many athletes that reach the professional level that you're now seeing. Once they leave the professional space and they have to go on to whatever their next career endeavor is going to be, their loss of value comes maybe from the fact that baseball, basketball, soccer, football, whatever it might be, is really all that you've been doing and pushing yourself. And that has been your brand before you went into the professional scape. And then for however long your career lasts, you haven't really been able to build much else aside from your personal and family life outside of that, because it's such a demanding job. Do you feel that that at all is something that needs to be looked at greater to make sure that the players are not so much just having to focus on baseball all the time or whatever sport they're playing?
It's a great observation, Justin. I mean, you just kind of diagnosed some of the stuff that we experience. I mean, we're one-dimensional. I'll be honest with you. We're one-dimensional. Our brand is kind of tied into exactly what we do on the field. I'm just going to say it. I don't think I was the epitome of it, but, professional athlete is one-dimensional to some degree, self-centered and narcissistic. And to some degree, they have to be to do what they do.
Absolutely.
With the stress level that they express. And that leads into dependencies on very simple things. And you can kind of diagnose from there out, right? Like, I have ideas, I'm sure you have ideas. I think we can sit here and talk about ideas about how to fix that. The people who make those decisions don't give a damn about it, really, honestly, because they're kicking that dead horse until as long as you're hitting home runs, that's all that matters. So, and to some degree, I'm not going to blame them. It's probably not their job to be that. The industry is not built around that, as far as like, maintaining a holistic perspective of the person for their own benefit. But if you think about it, what really is mental conditioning, mental performance, everything that goes into it, it's not, this is one of my hypotheses and why getting into before the field is what I want to do in my life is, if you really want high level people to perform at these, to their optimal ability and potential, never really physical, man. And it really comes down to like, they have some very strong character attributes that can be their own demons. And to some point, I believe, readjusting perspective and bringing back in a lot of the subjectivity of joy, of early stuff, of being a kid, things like that, like well-roundedness, giving an opportunity for energy and focus to go somewhere else, to give themselves a break to recharge, is really necessary. How do you do that is interesting. It involves relationships with different people. It involves behavioral change. For me, I just think, if you're selfish and you looked at like, how do I want this person to perform the best? And they're really good with all their abilities, and, they're going to be competing against the best too. I would be like, how do I get them to recharge to mental, like they're like the highest mental capability every day that they're competing? And if you look at it from that, as that's what I want, that's the goal. Well, then the problems come from anything that keeps them from recharging, which could be themselves and their own focus on one thing over and over. And now we're working backwards here to think of ideas on how to like actually get them to perform better and be recharged. Because, the control and management of stress, highly, at least I believe, highly related to the ability to focus, right, to reactions. And we're talking about split seconds where we don't really understand, like neurologically we can kind of, but split seconds and moments with high stress that we can't simulate. I'm going to guess like having full mental capacity is probably a good thing, so let's
help.
just from that point of view. And what you're mentioning here, I think, is related, 100%.
Hi, my name is Charlie Wund, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Agency for Student Health Research. When I started the company over a decade ago, I aimed to help reduce injuries within youth sports. Since then, Injure-Free was created as a risk management software platform and has grown to become one of the leading injury reporting platforms used by thousands of athletic organizations and schools nationwide. Our expansive education library and reporting technology provides the tools administrators need to take the pain out of risk management. As a former high school athletic director and youth sports organizer, I understand the regulatory compliance requirements and need for individual accountability. Our goal is to provide a service that does better than checking the box. For more information or to schedule a demo, please visit www.injurefree.com. That's www.injurefree.com.
Yeah,
that's it. So take that right now. So I want to come back to that, because I think what you just described, and there's a lot there that I think I want to relate back to youth sports and where this begins. So I want to bring it back, but I want you to use this opportunity to transition this. So then talk about what Before the Field is, how is it being applied now, and where do you see it going, from a need perspective? Where did you see the void in the industry? What have you created today? And then ultimately, where do you hope to be? And less than, keep it to 5 minutes or less, because I know there's a lot that could go on forever.
Yeah. This is a good challenge.
Yep.
So Before the Field is a app-based platform meant to support young athletes. Right now, it's in college levels, partnership with University of San Diego, just onboarded Stanford baseball team and trying to spread it in development to get better. But it's a functioning tool. It builds a digital interface for the athlete that is meant to support them and create stress management, foundations and behavioral long-term changes. It uses acceptance commitment therapy as its behavioral science to implement those things. So it's meant to support that person with a lot of personal development tools. That's highly engageable. I like to just basically say, use any engagement tactic possible, and then replace, all the proven tactics with really good content that's useful for the person. So that part is the athlete tool. And then the platform part comes with some sharing of information to where they connect to basically any coach, trainer, parent, or any person that is willing, that they want to support them in a passive support role. Since they're on their phone, most of the time, they're always there 24/7. So it's a separate tool that we call the coach tool. That coach tool basically receives information that the athlete decides to share, and it loosely monitors that athlete and how they're doing. And all the information within it, the data, whatever, that itself is kind of the athlete's own. And it's meant to be a proactive solution that in their hands reshapes their digital experience so that they can start working on stress management for themselves, take the accountability to do that as well, and have it at their fingertips. In general, that mission is really about, supporting young athletes, stress management, and ultimately bringing into, those athletes' lives. We talked about self-centered aspects, narcissism, things like that, those drives, those egos. It's not bad, not good. They're just saying neutral, but to bring in self-awareness and perspective and into their lives, asking one really specific question and associating to performance over and over and over, because it's work. It doesn't just happen overnight. And that specific question is, what do you value in your life? And, I'm messing this up and I'm probably going on for like 30 minutes probably, but as we were just talking, right, like it just really kind of dawned on me. Like I said, like loss of value. Like, I don't know what my value was. I went to business school and found more value. Asking the question, what do I value, is kind of determines like, who am I? Like, what do I give a damn about? Like, where's
And
my
who
attention?
are you today? Right.
Exactly.
Today, from where you were when you were 18, where you were when you were, 22, and where you are when you're 30, you're a different person in those windows.
100%. And it probably shouldn't take till I'm 30 something to actually ask myself that question or have someone ask it for me. And the idea is that question needs to be asked and answered by athletes associated to performance, so they understand they can fall back on it. So they have another dimension of who I am from this angle and what I care about. It's theirs. It should be theirs because it's really personal. So that platform is built around those kind of aspects, right? You can get into the details of it, but what it's meant to do is use the entire ecosystem, give coaches the opportunity, give trainers, give them an opportunity to be there when needed, using technology, and then kind of go after where young athletes' attention is away from the field, to give them something that kind of can benefit them, and use those kind of engagement tactics to bring something that they can use, and give them the freedom to do it. So it's very much their own decision on how they use the thing. There's all kinds of other things that go into it, but I hope that kind of shapes it. There's a lot more why. If you listen, I think we kind of understand the why after talking about a lot of this stuff, man. I think where I want to go with it, to answer that question, which is really important, what's going on with mental health in collegiate sports, I think is well documented. It's a crisis, right? I think in general for students in high school and in college, there's mental health crisis going on. I know sports. I'm using that as a vehicle to hopefully prove something for people that need it at these age groups. But ultimately, I think a lot of change can happen, and it's necessary because we kind of forget about youth sports a little bit in general. It's massive, set to explode as a market itself. I think that Charlie, more than anyone. You're the one who gave me all the data on it. But my point is, introducing the idea of what someone values at an early age, I believe, is a good thing. And I believe you can start building foundations for this self-awareness as a kid. A parent can help, a competitive team or organization can help. But the idea of building the self-awareness around that can create a strong pillar for stress management in the future, not just for sports, but just for their lives. And that's kind of around where I want to go with it. 60 million young kids play sports, sub 13 years old. And I think there's some change that can happen. And there's not really tools there for them, not tools for the parent, not tools for, the organizations. And maybe it's not their focus, but I think you're going to get some good change, and you're really going to support some athletes, and you're going to see a result generationally if you have a chance to engage them on a different level, and like you said, if you want to go even further, how important sports is to the world is significant, not just playing it, but what the influence is just from an attention merchant standpoint and how much attention it garners. Sports is one of the last things that really defines character. right? On a huge stage. And, protecting that young development is crucial. And, we can go into this as another conversation, but, I don't think we have that objective in mind, to be quite honest. Not enough people do. And, yeah.
Well,
it's good. Go ahead, Justin.
I was going to say, you kind of talk about how stress is something that you guys are trying to alleviate with Before the Field, which I think is a really important topic to, dive into. But with stress comes pressure. And you talked about, how many athletes there are sub 13, that I'm wondering, do you feel that, and maybe it's more about specialization in a certain sense, that young athletes today are being pushed at such a younger age to specify in a specific sport, but also go and play club ball, go and, compete in tournaments, and it no longer becomes about having fun. The mindset changes and shifts to winning is all. Do you think that that is, a problem area that hopefully you guys are trying to alleviate with Before the Field's actions?
100%. Kids, sponges, right? They're blank. They're just open canvases, right? They consume how we react as parents. I have two young kids, 8 and 10 years old. I try to identify when I mess up, right? Because the impact is lasting, and I try to learn from when I mess up, especially when I coach my kids a lot. No one's perfect. These parents, we're not perfect. Identifying where you come in, my shortcomings is what I learned from to get better. I think that what I described as a professional athlete, the single-minded focus, which is good and bad, has different ramifications and a lot of things tied to it. You think about specialization for a kid and how it just starts there, right? Like, that's just the psychological side. Charlie mentioned the physical side, from overuse of muscle groups and muscle movements, especially if they're doing one side or only using one part of their body. Maybe you look at the development of athleticism and how do you define that in space, and how coordinated in the rhythm of the body is it developing using different cross training. I will always be a proponent of multi-sport athletes, but you see the arguments happen, right, with assessments from these competitive teams being used to seeing specialized kids and better developed athletes at playing games or in game at younger ages, and that's what they're used to, and that may deter the developing athlete. One, but my point is, going back to that stress, right? Like, if you play a lot of sports, you're going to feel like a value association tied to how you do and the results of those sports. Now you make it into a single sport, and now all of those eggs are in that one basket. So we're going from like, just, hey, I play sports, I'm an athlete. Okay. My value is an athlete. Well, I play all these sports. Okay. That's still, it's broad only based on how many sports you play, but ultimately they narrow down as you go, if you are fortunate to keep going. So, I still have a value associating that I'm an athlete. Okay, well, what else am I beyond the athlete? That's the multi-sport athlete. Now you have the specialized athlete. Well, I'm a soccer player.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm a soccer player. Then what else? Well, guess what, guys? I was 26 years old, and that was my job. I was a baseball player. I don't know. It's not making sense to me, and I can't describe it. That those are very similar perspectives, and one of them is a blank canvas. That makes sense. So I guess this is the way to describe. That's interesting psychologically. So probably need something that pulls them away from the field, that maybe rides with them along the field to just remind them a little bit that, you're more than this. And all of them need it, whether you're multi-sport or a single sport athlete and specialized. From the psychological standpoint, I'm telling you, I truly believe, those are my hypotheses. This is what we're going after. This is what I'm trying to do, trying to prove. I don't know if I can prove it. It's just gut and what I've experienced and just talking and living in this environment, trying to read papers, trying to get better myself, my own path, my own therapy, my own growth mindset to keep going. What I've found out about myself is very much wrapped up in the passion behind Before the Field, because Before the Field is my saving grace of what I am beyond being a baseball player. That's the truth of it. I'll tell you, if I don't do this, then I have behavioral patterns that bring me back. right into that old mindset because I lived that for the majority of my life. So this is where I'm going with this for myself. But at the same time, I very much think it's wrapped up into like, hey, can we get something here early? And maybe I'm wrong with what I'm doing. I don't care, but we got to start building something for that group because that's just my opinion.
I think this is the point that you had brought up before that I think that I love, and I don't know if I've ever really thought about or heard, but it's this debate about the singularity in our identity as an athlete. And certainly with the sports specialization at earlier ages now, we're telling our 13-year-olds, you're a soccer player, and then their entire life revolves around that. And then we already know at some point that you're going to be away from that. And it happens during the sport when we're injured. Your identity then is, okay, well, what am I now if I'm an injured soccer player? Like I'm less than, and I'm away from the sport I play. But then at some point, you're not going to be. You're going to be removed. You're going to stop playing that game. That's going to happen at some point in your life. And if you don't understand and have the confidence in yourself or have the foundation built to understand who you are, what your values are away from that one thing, then you are completely lost. And I think that does explain a ton about our society and on so many different levels. And you hear the NCAA advertise it all the time. Most of our athletes go on to become doctors and lawyers and all these other things, but they don't talk about how that transition happens. And they don't talk about where the process is. So I'm going to take my crack at what Before the Field is. And I'm going to say that it is a mental health application that provides young athletes the tools and framework and foundation to identify a core self of who they are on and off the field, and gives them the tools to deal with stress successful in sports and away from sports, while connecting their caregiver community and allowing them to create a support structure for those moments when they do begin to slip away from those identities, and helping to build upon that foundation to understand who they are.
I love it. It's recorded. I'm happy.
That's I was going to say, we might have the commercial right now.
You just crushed that. Did you write that down? Is that like next?
No. And I'm trying to tell you, like
you made perfect eye contact. You stared into my soul, man. And I was like, "There's no way he's reading that." That was incredible. That's perfect. Thank you. I'm gonna actually. I gotta write that.
We'll send you the. You got. It'll be on the podcast, right?
That was great.
But here's the thing. What I think, uncovered that, and what sealed that really is when you think about how we talk about these things, this identity, and it really comes down to value, like you've been saying. It's what do we value? My younger daughter is she's got some great athletic ability, but she still doesn't really care. I mean, she's figuring things out. She doesn't know, it's fun for her, and she continues to engage. So we continue to dabble and do things. Whereas my older daughter has a strong focus and commitment, and she feels very strongly about that, to the point where, I frustrate her with some of the drills we do because she's not successful at those drills. And I'm like, but you got better, because you're going through these processes. But we have to continue to resonate and come back to that, almost a lightning rod, our foundation of who we are no matter what. And then we gain confidence in that. And that's what's lacking. When we lose that confidence, everything falls apart. And it goes back to your hitting mentality of, I was going to be successful. I'm going to control what I can control. But I know by doing this, I'm putting myself in a position to be successful, because you had that confidence. You learn that over the time. And many people don't have that. They're not provided that framework. They're not raised a certain way. They don't have the experiences, and that's what I think you guys are trying to do with Before the Field, and it's working. And you're seeing some really good successes with the programming.
No, I appreciate that, Charlie. That was really, well said. Like I said, completely joking aside, like those are notes I'll take to be able to express it succinctly, and basically consolidate a bunch of kind of just random ideas, not random, but just ideas. But when you bring that, when it comes down to value, and it kind of clicked for me a little bit when I was just talking, I'm like, oh, that's weird. Why have I not been aware of that? Right? Like, values are an interesting thing. My last two things on it is they change, right? They change with us as people. They literally are tied to who we become. They are a reflection of who we are. Being aware of them is kind of understanding who we are, and you kind of need to have that a little bit, it goes back to, if you're an old man, and what I know now versus what I would have done then. This one kind of can be tied in if you start asking the question early.
Yeah.
This is simply a statement of what I care about, and it might be an 8-year-old caring about ice cream after the game, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It might be a teenager caring about getting drafted and making money. Well, let's just know what I value. Let me know what I value so I can say it, and if it changes, it changes. It's going to change with who I become as a person. So, but no, that's we've had some. It's interesting. There's a lot of intrinsic there, a lot of intrinsic motivation to want to understand it. I think athletes like that question.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the systems we've built with Before the Field are, we're on a good path. We're having some success. Hope to keep doing it. And you just put your head down and keep listening to the athletes and keep asking that question and building things that bring it back into their visual field and back into their back into their attention, whether it's direct or indirect.
Well, my man, we appreciate you being on and taking some time and talking about this stuff. Obviously important topics and ways that we're changing our lives and as adults now, and focusing on giving back and trying to look back and fill some of those holes. I always like to finish off with a question that's a huge top level question. So I'm afraid on this one, but
oh gosh,
if you could snap your fingers overnight and change one thing about youth sports, what would you change?
Okay, I keep it
Immediate
short.
results.
Immediate results. Sorry.
It's not easy, and not many people have an immediate answer, so don't feel out of place.
If I could change one thing about youth sports right now,
It's the first thing that comes to your mind.
I mean, it's all tied into what we're just talking about, right?
Sure.
It's hard because there's so many things to change. That's the big problem that Charlie, is always bringing up.
Yeah,
there's too much that
joke
needs to be fixed.
If I could change one thing about youth sports, it's just hard. It's a hard question. I mean, if I'm going to answer it, and I'm going to have kind of an answer in like an hour after I've thought about it more. The car ride home for a parent, it involves that. And I don't know the answer. And this is the car ride home with your parent after a practice and after a game. So after the event, after the performance, if overnight you could get parents to buy into a system that is about changing their kids' focus to something like really positive and inspirational for about 10 minutes, so that that really absorbed time, I guess you're not allowed to talk to your kid about what happened about sports. You have to talk to them for 10 minutes about something else, whether it's Taylor Swift or Roblox. And then from there, it would mean a lot to that kid to realize that that parent, didn't care about what that kid just did. So it would be the 10 minutes after on a car ride home from a game or a practice that parents would buy into, like, hey, this is what I do for the betterment of my son's or daughter's development. I guess that makes any sense. The 10 rides, the 10 minute effective system after performance.
Love it.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely won't hear an answer like that to this question as long as we do this show. We'll never hear something like that, I can guarantee, because truly, I think a lot of people think more about affecting some kind of rule change or a way that the game can be played to help keep the athletes safe. You're thinking about how to round out the human being behind the athlete. And I think that is something that is truly great. It goes to show what you guys are doing with Before the Field. And I think it also just goes to show the kind of person that you are, that you think about the whole being rather than just that one singular focus.
I appreciate that. Just, I'll be honest. And sometimes I really fail in those 10 minutes, man. Those are tough, right?
Tough.
And I need help. So I got to think about that. I appreciate, I guess I keep thinking about it. You got my mind going a little bit right now. So
we'll get you another opportunity.
Yeah.
We'll have a spin-off on this podcast. We touched on a lot of things that need to continue on. So and we'll be checking in with you for sure.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you, Carlos. We appreciate the work you're doing, and we certainly appreciate your time here today. So
I appreciate you guys, Charlie. Thank you for the time. Justin, thank you again. This flew by. It was a great experience. Thank you.
Of course. We would like to thank you all for listening to today's episode of the Safety Goals Podcast, presented by Injury Free. I'm your host, Justin Torres. To listen to other episodes of the Safety Goals Podcast, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.